So eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is EMDR, it's an interactive psychotherapy technique that is used to help relieve psychological stress. Basically, it's very effective for trauma. It's very effective for depression, anxiety, panic attacks, people that have insomnia, and several other types of factors. It also works really well with complex trauma. So I just wanted to kind of explain the difference between having a traumatic experience versus complex trauma. Complex trauma is when you have been exposed to a type of trauma that has been ongoing. So for example, a child that may be sexually abused throughout their life and they've had more than one incident, it's been consistent, and they maybe have had other perpetrators outside of the original perpetrator that have sexually abused them. That would be a chronic trauma, chronic traumatic experience. That could be something as witnessing, depending how you grew up, maybe you witnessed crime on a daily basis and that impacted you and it shaped your worldview, shaped how you function, and it shaped the choices that you make, and how that led you into adulthood. Okay, those are complex trauma type situations. They do not have to be that extreme. You could have situations where you're consistently shamed or consistently put down, and that would have been considered a form of complex trauma because it affected you in the long term. Okay. Now, incidences or experiences that were traumatic could be something like a car accident, something where my friend got bit by a dog and I witnessed it. It could be something that is in that moment shocking to you, caused you to go into a fight or flight response, and from that point moving forward, shaped how you reacted in life, right? So those are the differences between the two. EMDR, what it actually does is it can access and help heal both of those types of situations. What it does is when you're sleeping at night and you go into what's called a REM sleep, your eyes are actually doing this. They're going back and forth. They're going a lot faster than what with the video lag here. But they're moving back and forth. And what's happening is that information that you experienced that day, everything from the knowledge of what happened to how you interpreted meaning to a situation, and how it was stored in your body, all is going into the right side of your brain, which is called your amygdala. Okay, this is where memory goes. And what happens is when we have ongoing situations, we like to say the term like what fires together wires together. So you have an experience, and then you have a belief that links, right? So I'll give you an example. My best friend's walking home from school, and I've shared this with many of my clients. My best friend's walking home from school. She gets attacked by a dog. And I see it happen. And in that moment, I'm watching my friend in terror. She eventually gets free from the dog. She's fine. She shakes it off like no big deal. She goes home. But what happened in that moment is, boom, event happened. The dog attacks. That produced norepinephrine, adrenaline, and cortisol in my body. I am in fight or flight response. I'm ready to run away from that situation or throw down or maybe pass out. I can freeze too. But in that moment, that's what happened. And from that point forward, in that instant second of all this going on in my body, I suddenly am like, dogs are dangerous. And this neural pathway goes clink in my brain. All right. And it locks. It's locked in there. Now what happens is now with time, I have experiences that start off with just that one experience, but they grow with time because I've had similar incidences where I've seen dogs maybe be a little bit more aggressive, or maybe I've seen my friend kind of playing with her dog and it looked like it bit her and she kind of cried a little bit, even though it was playful. My brain didn't know the difference. My brain in that moment said that very first initial experience is how I'm interpreting all dogs moving forward, because it has not moved from the emotional part of the brain to reason and logic, which is up here. So when you're sleeping, your brain is taking all this information, moving it, boom, here. Now, if you have had something traumatic, and you have not processed that traumatic event, it stays there. So when you're having, your brain is resting and things are getting stored, it goes right into stored memory. Now, what we want to do is we want to access that stored memory. And we want to be able to move that forward to your executive brain, which is what happens for most people when they have had experiences and they've been able to like think about it, journal about it, talk about it with a friend, feel the emotions that they need to feel. And then they're like, oh, I'm okay. Everything worked out for the better. It's fine. Dogs are not dangerous. Life is good. That would be processed information. They probably wouldn't have the same experiences as someone who didn't process that information. And this is where EMDR comes in. So basically, going back, you have unprocessed information that's been stuck. Now here you are as an adult, you see a little chihuahua coming at you, and it's a puppy. I mean, how much smaller and how cute could that be? A tiny, tiny, tiny little puppy. And it's coming at you, but you instantly go into fight or flight response. And you go back to when you were that little girl watching your friend get mauled. You are experiencing that same type of adrenaline rush, cortisol, norepinephrine. You're sweating, you're having heart palpitations, your body's locking up, and you don't know what to do. That would be called a triggered response. And that happens to all of us in all kinds of situations. I think of people that are married, and then their spouse says one comment to them or looks a certain way, and they instantly they're flared up and they're ticked and they go from a 0 to a 10, and it's very irrational. And then their spouse is like, what did I do? I don't understand what just happened here. Chances are it had nothing to do with the spouse. The spouse did something that reminded them of something way back when that now was brought to the surface in that moment. It was a trigger response because whatever they experienced or believed from something way, way, way back in the day now is in their face in that moment. And that causes all of those sensations, both physiologically, feeling all the somatic responses, as well as what's happening in your belief system. So what EMDR does is we access all of it. We access it in a very safe way and in very fragmented ways if needed. For clients, depending on what they've been through. And we basically isolate memory and we desensitize it through bilateral stimulation. EMDR has been proven one of the most effective treatments for PTSD. It used to be, for those of you that are familiar with some of the psychological terms and different models of therapies, we've often used what's called cognitive behavioral therapy to help change thought patterns and help people kind of look at their life in a different lens or different perspective. We've also used exposure therapy, where we've had clients actually go back to that place and see it in its fullness and try to help them have a higher threshold of tolerance. All of those things can be effective, but they're not always helpful for clients that maybe struggle with the actual, hey, trying to change behavior is really hard, and trying to change these responses is very hard. And then for some, being exposed to what they've already been exposed to re-traumatizes them, and that's too much. And EMDR is very different in the sense that we actually don't do a lot of talking. Less is more. I always tell folks, I'm like, listen, 25 words or less. As we're starting to build a treatment plan, we talk through that process, but once we get into it, and once we start doing the bilateral stimulation, we're just allowing your brain to do what it's meant to do when you sleep. We're just doing it while you're awake. And so what we're doing through bilateral stimulation is accessing both the right and the left side of the brain. So you're going from emotion to logic, which keeps it very safe and allows you to be very present in the process of healing. Some folks that I've talked to that are afraid of disassociation, and that's a very real fear, and it is something to be very careful with when you're working with clients that have had a lot of traumatic experiences or situations in their life where they were not able to control what was happening, and they had to create false realities in order to keep themselves safe. That's very common. Or folks that may have had, maybe actually do have some mental health disorders, and they're afraid of EMDR, what's this going to look like? And I was telling you guys, it's totally safe as long as we're accessing both sides of the brain at the same time. And I do a real good job of keeping everybody on track, and I watch your body and how you're responding to make sure that it's a safe model to work with for you. So basically, going back, once we bilaterally stimulate, which is right brain, left brain, right brain, left brain, we focus on a specific part of the memory. It can be something that's actually happened or something that hasn't. Because some people can imagine, if I was put in this situation, this is how I'd respond. And so we go, let's isolate that. If that's more helpful for you and you feel a bit safer in that, let's do that. For some people, they are like, I don't even have a memory. I don't even know. I just know I feel this way. What do I do? And I'll say, hey, do you feel it in your body? When you think about it, do you notice things in your body? And they'll say, yeah, my stomach starts and I can feel it in my chest and my arms and my shoulders hurt. And we're like, great, let's isolate those things and actually do bilateral stimulation and see what pops up for you. For some folks, I'll have them color. Hey, here's your gingerbread man. Why don't you draw some colors and show me what these colors represent? What do they mean? And we'll bilaterally stimulate through that, and it'll take them back into that neural pathway, because that's all we're trying to do is gain access to that belief system that originally fired together and wired together. And we basically want it to unravel. And then what we want to do is we want to now have a new positive belief So instead of thinking all dogs are dangerous, I'm like, you know what? Not all dogs are dangerous. That one dog was dangerous, but actually, I don't have to be afraid of dogs, right? I'm not afraid of dogs. And we strengthen that, and we allow that new belief system to now come in. We call that a positive adapted belief. So you have that new belief system linked together with evidence where that's been true. And the way that would look is maybe someone had seen a dog and they thought it was so cute, and their friend played with that dog, and the dog was real sweet and loving, and all of a sudden they remember that memory. Oh, that dog was really nice. And it sinks. And we just build on top of that until that becomes a strengthened neural pathway, so that what ends up happening is all those physiological responses from the moment they saw that dog that took them back to when they were a little kid, they're gone. The memory is there, but the pain, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, the physical responses, all of that stuff is gone, is desensitized. You don't forget it. You know that it happened, but you're no longer bound to feel like controlled by it, which is what I say a lot of folks that I work with that have anxiety, that tends to be the thing. They're like, I just feel overtaken by this anxiety. I can't make it stop. And oftentimes it's because of trauma, or it's negative belief systems, or learned behavior. You know, we can watch our parents respond a certain way when we're growing up, and we do the same thing, you know? So that's kind of how that works. EMDR in itself has been, I believe I said this already, has been very highly effective for PTSD, but it works across the board for anything, you guys. I love using this with folks that have anxiety. They might even have, panic attacks or depression. Not insomnia. You can isolate insomnia with this. Body pain. So for some of you guys that have just had chronic pain in your body, oftentimes that's related to something else. So we can address all those things in EMDR. The beauty of it is that 15 minutes, there we go. 15 minutes of EMDR is equivalent to 5 hours of talk therapy. You guys, you get more bang for your buck. And I think that's important. I love doing therapy. I love working with people, but as a therapist, I am a failure if I have clients that are long-term. And what I mean by that is if a client is dependent on me all the time, they need to see me every week for 2 years. I'm not helping them. I'm not helping them function. Some people love just to have the consistency of a therapist, which I think that's helpful. And that's a good thing. Once a month, they're checking in. How are we doing? That's great. And that's just good for preventative things, right? Because sometimes we just need to make sure we have that outlet for ourselves, which is healthy and good. But if I have a client who's continuously suffering and they are going long term with me, then I'm not doing my job right. I'm not. I take a lot of time and investment in making sure that I've learned my material. I'm always up to date with new neuroscience and things that are happening, because I want to help you feel like you can function in your day-to-day and that you've got some tools in your tool belt to do these things. What I'm not saying is that some folks, there are seasons for that. There are times where you're like, I'm 6 months in and, had some tragedy happen and I need support. And that's absolutely valued and important and wonderful. And I'm not a failure if I'm along your side doing that. But I definitely just want to make sure that you guys are really experiencing change for yourselves. And so when you're like, yeah, that issue that used to bother me doesn't bother me anymore. Like, I was faced with that same situation and it's not a big deal. That's amazing to me. And it works because you put in the effort. It works because you're willing to go to those deeper places and try those deeper things. I just want to say that if you've never done EMDR and you're a little concerned about it or worried about it, please reach out. I'd love to send you some material and just help you understand a little bit more about what it does and how your brain is actually bilaterally stimulated and how things are activated in order to help you heal. The beauty of it is that it is very, we can fragment it. So for those of you that maybe have a little bit more of a history of some tough stuff and you're like, I just don't want to go back to those deep, hard places, we don't have to. Or we can isolate little parts and work our way to the big stuff so that it's a gradual, comfortable experience. I work really hard to make sure you're safe, and I want you to feel comfortable, and I want you to walk out laughing. I always want clients to, at the end of the day, hey, we did some good work. We had a good time. We maybe had some hard stuff we had to go through, but man, on the other side of this, we're gonna laugh and we're gonna celebrate, and we're gonna really, really just know that you've got the support that you need from me as a therapist. But by walking out that door, you feel really confident in yourself. So anyhow, I will definitely put some resources out there for you guys to access that will help you understand what EMDR is a little bit better. I'm on a very short window of time here to share this with you, and I can't get all the details in 15 minutes, but I will say it's very effective, you guys. And if it's something you've never tried, my name is Sheila Simons. I would love to work with you. And I can do EMDR through an online platform or in person, depending on, there are some considerations that I have to think about when it comes in doing it online, just to make sure we have safety. But otherwise, we can access both platforms. Personally, I love meeting you in person because I think we get a lot more out of it. But we can definitely do it in an online platform as well. So I just want to thank you guys for just watching this and just listening in a little bit and trying to wrap your mind around what is EMDR and how does it work. I'll give you guys some history about it and some different details so that you can do a little research yourselves and just see if this is a good fit for you and something you might be interested in doing. But I look forward to meeting any of you that I have not met yet. And for those of you that are watching that I have linked up with, hi, I hope you guys are having a great day. Take care.